Why don't we bring it? Why don't we call it to order? Call the meeting to order. Nice to see you all after summer. Does anyone have an agenda? You maybe need one?
There's extra material.
I try not to print.
Oh, I'm making you feel bad because I brought extra copies.
Okay.
It's the old-fashioned thing. So I think I distributed the minutes also that, did you take notes on that? In the minutes last time? That you just written up for July 11th?
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, they were really thorough. I was wondering if it was you.
That was the minutes.
Yeah, that was a good job. Anyway, so maybe someone can, I don't have the minutes with me, but I assume you've all read them, and maybe someone can do the voting thing to have them approved. Someone,
Vote to approve.
Well, someone just
Yeah.
handed them to me.
excuse me?
Someone just handed the minutes, you said you didn't have them.
Oh, yeah, that was probably my copy.
Okay.
In case anyone wanted to discuss anything, I was bringing an extra copy. I know you're all detailed readers and probably had lots of comments on them, but anyone second on the motion approved and one for approving? And so those pass and are duly put into the record. And I thought, so I guess it's not officially the end of the summer, but maybe just hear what your summer's all been like in terms of voting and local water stuff. No more Greenland stuff, you know. How's everybody's voting season been though?
Excellent.
Good.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I'm sort of curious observations on our area. I've certainly heard reports of a lot of porpoises. I was hearing, besides the early Captain Warnick sighting, I'm hearing at Citizens Advisory Committee meeting, the Long Island Sound Study, a lot of sightings of porpoise, and like a herd of, like, if they're called herd. Pod, thank you. At least I questioned that before I went on. Like 50 of them making their rounds around the sound. I don't know, did anyone have luck?
I didn't see any out there, but
Yeah.
big bluefish seem to be back, that they hadn't been in prior years. So that was good.
The
Lots of
kayaking,
bait.
the kayaking yesterday, and the stripers were starting to come in. People were having luck. I guess they come in from Block Island. They start to be sighted, and more come in, and people were saying they were starting. We saw two being caught actually.
I saw a big seal this summer in just the middle of the sound, which was
Our area, wasn't it?
yeah, right off Stanford, which was unusual to see them this time of year.
Yeah, totally.
Seen a lot of fish activity for sure, but I don't know what they are. But
Bill Lucy from Save the Sound, so he is on the water all the time. He was the sound keeper. He was always on the boat. And I think he does a lot of boat activity still. He said he talks to a lot of fishermen too. He says there's been more sighting or catching, and maybe sighting in the catch of nets and things, of more southern species. So for example, there was a giant fish, like 50, 60 pounds, called a cobia, that was caught, and that's meant to be brought up the Gulf Stream, and very unusual to be so big in our waters. But also, I think he was mentioning some different types of bass that are more commonly down south, that they were catching more of. And there's some graph that was on, I forget what site, maybe it was Long Island Sound Studies. They put up like blogs and stuff, which showed that over the last like 3 or 4 years, the amount of warm water fish in our area has really increased, and cold water fish have decreased. It's sort of frightening in its way when you think about it.
I mean, we've noticed the water temperature readings we're getting off of our nav system are really high, middle Long Island's eastern and Long Island State, 76 degrees, 78 degrees. One of our friends said they read a few days ago, and it just really, usually if it was less than 71 or 72, you were like, woo.
Yeah. That's for nice swimming.
It makes for nice swimming, yeah, but then as you said, it's a little disturbing, but.
Jim Ammerman, so this was at the same Long Island Sound Studies Citizens Action Committee meeting this last week. Jim Ammerman's one of their scientists who reports in regularly. And he noted that the hypoxia that gets in our western part of the sound has been steady for about 5 years. And yet the water temperature has been getting warmer. And in this last year, they attributed it to the fact that it was steady when you have warmer water temperature, to the fact that there weren't any nutrients being run off the land because of the drought.
Okay.
That's how they were anecdotally thinking about it. I'm not sure. improving. But he showed us a couple charts and the late July and August, red circles where the epoxy extends all over the western Long Island Sound just weren't that big compared to where they were the year before, just sort of steady for 5 years. So sort of good news, despite the warming water, maybe.
The
The trout. And the fish species determined to be here. They said also that the Menhaden were medium this year compared to last. People have seen that in the water now.
I sit overlooking the Saugatuck River every day from my office, and I've seen what seems like many fewer for this time of year than you would have in past years.
Of what?
The bunker.
Oh.
I've seen a decent amount of peanut bunker around, small ones, but
Do you guys go fishing regularly?
my son does.
Yeah.
He had good fishing this summer.
Big stripers, right?
Big stripers, sharks.
What's that, like sand sharks, sand tiger sharks?
Yeah. No, but like 5-6 feet long.
Really?
Like huge stripers. I mean, like I saw pictures from guys that they were like wrestling them into the boat. I mean, like
Yeah, they're-
you know,
Yeah,
They
catch
stayed,
and release things.
stayed through the summer, kind of.
I
Yeah.
did. They stayed way later than they normally do.
Yeah.
Cool. How about, I'm curious on the boating, so like 2 years ago we were all noting that like everybody and their cousin was out there with a new boat and like half the people didn't know how to drive and it was just sort of crazy. Has that calmed down? 'Cause we sold our sailboat 2 seasons ago, so I'm crawling around the shore in my kayak and getting less observations on all the boating traffic because I'm keeping away from the boats. I don't know, what do people see out there?
I didn't think this summer was noteworthy, like one way or the other. It just seemed like
Agreed. I didn't see too many crazies out there.
I will say there's a lot more action at Fish Island than this. I noticed there was a lot more action at Fish Island throughout the tide cycles than I noticed in years past, and maybe I was just more aware of it. But it seemed like even at low tide, they were anchoring. Not they, or there were a lot of people anchoring to the west of Fish Island and hanging there, and then I don't know if they're walking there, but there seemed to be a lot of boats there at low tide. And I always thought at low tide people stayed away, but
Well,
Yeah,
someone who
sailors
goes out
is-
there at all tides a lot.
you go,
Yeah.
yeah.
If you have a shallow draft boat,
Yeah.
it's easy enough to get in and out of there.
Yeah.
And Ziegler's is very busy.
Yeah.
And then Scott's has now become like a main anchorage on the weekends.
Yeah.
And there's frequently a dozen or more boats in there.
I've seen that a
That
couple
didn't
times.
used to be like that,
Yeah.
but
I always used to go to Scott's because everyone was in Ziegler's, and now it doesn't seem to hold the advantage. Yeah. I was there July 4th weekend kayaking around, and I just couldn't believe the amount of people. It was something. Half of the teenagers having a great time. It was enviable for that age.
We said this last year, I think, but I still am very impressed with the number of girls out operating boats, young girls full of, like, just a boat full of girls in their teens or high school age. And I don't think 10 years ago you saw that as much. I think it's just kind of cool to see, and I mean, there's a lot of kids out there, but I think there's definitely more girls out on the water than there ever were before.
Something tells me that a boatload of girls is safer than a boatload of guys. I just think of beer and speeding.
Different kind of trouble.
They're looking for the guys.
Yeah. But
Interesting. Well, I was out on Sunday and I came across I guess it was a general Rowayton, town of Rowayton thing, a swim from Bailey Beach. They started at the Greens Ledge Light and did a swim for charity back to Bailey Beach. Yeah, and the police boats were out there, and I met Jimmy Martin out on the water, which was sort of fun. I was in my kayak with a friend, and he immediately says, "Can you roll that thing?" So we just sat there, and I just was talking. I just had come out, and he kept on looking at me like I should, so I did for him. And then he was really wowed by that. It's just sort of pretty cool. But he asked if it was time for them to come in and give their end of season talk. And I don't think Derek's on the water anymore, Derek Mulcahy, so we should have them either next month or the month after, giving their end of season report. And I think Jimmy's out there a lot, but I don't know if he's in charge of the operation, so we'll have to figure out how to. Does anyone know Jimmy Martin? Like, to reach out? Okay. I'll reach out to him and see who should present it. But I think that's always sort of valuable to hear what their concerns are. He and his partner actually started talking about all the kayak trouble they had seen over the summer. And it started in the spring where they had a bunch of guys out without life preservers, and in a canoe was one of the things. But they also ran into some trouble with people in the middle of the sound in the summer dehydrated, sitting in a kayak all just in a frying pan. So they started to give me a little lecture, and I started to spew the same stuff back, and we had a nice, we gotta make sure these guys are safe out there. So it was a good exchange, actually. All right, well, so why don't I give you the chairman's report and discussion. It doesn't look like the harbor master's here, which is disappointing, because I think we'd like to hear more about what's happening in the harbor, main harbor and the moorings. But maybe
I can give you at least my perspective.
yeah, why don't we get into that just a little bit. My stuff's sort of quick. We talked a lot about the Great Island acquisition last time, and have you all read the paper on that? That's I guess the parties have both agreed to do a 5-month extension of the close. And I reached out to Monica because we've got an intersection, obviously, both the harbor and with the coastal zone that they're contemplating doing things with, and we'd like to know where this is going and how we can input. She said at this point she confirmed what the newspaper reports are, that there's a 5-month extension till March, and that the parties have agreed just to work on extra due diligence with regard to environmental matters and with access matters. So that's as much as I know about that.
Are there existing environmental matters that have been identified, or?
What one might think so, but I didn't hear that. Yeah, so.
Like buried oil tanks, or?
Yeah, LUST
Big
stuff.
pile of horse manure behind the barn.
You think they had a skeet shooting range there, and there's lots of lead back in there too?
I bet they did.
I bet.
It's everybody.
I mean, do we know which party is requesting the extension?
The town.
It is the
I think
town.
so, yeah.
Okay.
I think so, yeah.
It's definitely town.
Okay.
I mean, I guess good that we got the extension, but I don't know anything more about it than
Mhm.
that, so I guess we'll just keep on standing poised to see where we might have input.
When was that supposed to be, sort of, the extension gets pushed out to what?
To March,
March.
5 months, yeah. So,
Which is, by the way, more than 5 months, but.
I thought I read March, and I thought I read
It is,
5.
it is March,
Well,
but it
yeah.
got extended from August, so.
Yeah, okay. Well, wasn't the original close meant to be early September?
Thought so, September,
Yeah.
yeah.
5th or 10th or something like that? Yeah. Curious what it is. Yeah. Anyway, another item, you guys remember Steve Schaefer, Stellamar Oysters?
Yeah.
Remember, he's got a bunch of buoys that sit off of Chopin Point, and they're for his oyster farm, and they've never been marked. And about, was it 2 years ago, we said you should mark those and reach out to NOAA and stuff. And I don't think when we asked it, it was so well received. But he did something about it, so he thought more about it, I guess, or got more input, and he had a nice note to me the other day, and he had reached out to the NOAA folks for charting and said, I own this and it should be on the chart, and they've agreed, so that's getting on the charts, which is nice. So I guess
That
that's
is good, because at night you can't see
Yeah,
those
it's
at all.
wrong that that hasn't been there.
Aren't they all connected too? Like,
So
aren't they all connected, kind of surface level?
No,
No, that's not, okay.
no, they go down, but you can still
Run through them.
run.
Yeah,
He must lose them all the time.
Yeah.
yeah,
I would think it's
advantageous.
That's his motivation.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, he must have lost enough. Anyways, I did get a nice note, even though he had been offered some pushback early on. So anyways, that I think is good. I think we all had talked about that. I think, Flip, you had brought that up initially. So anyways, it's been a good result. I guess, why don't we all just keep our eye on the charts so that this isn't a 2-year process, but maybe you can see if it happens earlier. New dock applications, well, I don't know what to do with these ever quite except read them, but I sent you guys along, hopefully they made it to your inboxes, they were like 7 and 8 megabytes. 53 Contentment Island, that's the big construction project that's been underway, and you made note of how big that dock looked.
It's enormous.
Yeah, it's like 94 feet, I think that might be it. It is over, at least per the diagram, it's over an existing seawall that they are refurbishing, and most of it is on the landward side of the seawall. So I haven't gone and taken a look at it like you have, I think you've seen it, but it sounds like it's already working within a high defacement of the shoreline to start with, the seawall, which is being allowed, has been allowed, and they're refurbishing it so potentially.
It was like done months ago, right? So
Yeah, well, I mean, I just saw this, just this last month, but I don't know what they were doing there. So I was sort of defanged by that, the fact that there's a seawall. Have you looked at the chart? Yeah.
But to your understanding, the project is it's certainly underway.
Is this Contentment Island or is this Delafield? I'm sorry.
It's Contentment.
Contentment. So, but what can we say to a project that's already underway?
it's completed. I mean, it's been completed for months, right?
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
There's a new mooring out there too. Sorry if I'm getting. Contentment is between Fish Island, right? That's,
Yeah, yeah.
That's that one, that big
That,
long
like,
steel pier where the
Just east
gangway
of
lifts up.
Collier Cove,
Yeah.
it's just east of that. Yeah.
Okay. There's a brand new mooring out there too that says private. That is right
It
off
just sits up there.
of that dock. It's a big ball with a chain that runs all the way through. It'd be interesting to know if the harbor master granted permission or if they just
Yeah.
did it.
I just remember to mention it to
But
Joe.
it would make sense that it was, tied to that pier.
Did you see the cross hatchings that look like a seawall? That's meant to be existing, and they're refurbishing that. And you see how that embodies most of the dock. I was at loss to understand what that looks like from the water.
I kind of don't even understand what I'm looking at here, honestly.
And now we're in trouble. So that was where I'd heard your exclamation on it, but I wasn't. If that seawall exists and they're making it look nicer, and most of the dock is behind, I wasn't feeling what you were feeling. But maybe I need to get out there and see it. But I don't know what we can do about it anyway.
Last time I was out there was maybe 2 weeks ago, and I thought the whole project had been completed months ago.
Yeah, I'm just seeing this now.
The date of that drawing is 2019, so
So we're obviously behind, and maybe this was the latest iteration.
Yeah, it looks
But
like
to
maybe they were
Grant's point,
realigning a portion of the dock, the
looks-
tweak to the plan.
it looks like an awfully big kind of dock compared to what had been there, which I think was nothing for many years.
I don't remember anything being there.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like, though, from the plan that something was there, and so I'm thinking maybe that it's been dilapidated or pulled out, but it had already been permitted. I don't know.
I don't know, I've been going out there for plus or minus 15 years.
And that's all new.
I'd never seen anything out there before.
I don't know what to say on it. So, like,
But there's two out there now. Aren't there two piers on Contentment Island, in between Fish Island and on that section? Aren't there two now? I thought there were two new docks within the past 2 years out there.
I don't remember the second one.
Maybe I'm wrong,
well, quite frankly, our ability to change these things seems so low, right? So we just took the worst case possible, right? 200 feet on Goodwise River and swung and, watched the ball just go by, it's just, I think the only way we get licensed on one of these is if we're becoming one of these harbor management official commissions, and there's a role carved out for us. Or if we have a politician in town or locally, someone who wants to, or neighbors who want to raise a clamor, and the fact that we surface it and we're making it public, perhaps that attracts attention, which hopefully would create the clamor if it's on the front, what we think is a good aesthetic and usage of our water.
I mean, would it make sense for us to try to clarify what our position is with the town? In other words, if we want to swing hard and we can't hit anything, and maybe we should just clarify, town, if you want our advice, we're here to provide it, but we're not going to proactively comment on each one of these permits because we don't really have a voice in it.
Well, the issue is that the town itself doesn't really comment on these applications. This is a deep, a state level approval. The town's P&Z's kind of actual approval rights are kind of ministerial on these docks typically. And at least that's what we've heard from Jeremy in the past. And so they don't need a whole bunch of additional people typically making a lot of noise. I do think there's one follow-on item for the Goodwives River dock, which is to talk to P&Z about preventing that sort of thing in the future where, if you remember, the one of the rationales that the homeowner there, the landowner there used for having such a big dock is that they were putting 4 houses worth of docks into one.
4 waterfront lots.
4 waterfront lots, and that's not really factual. It's 2 waterfront lots, but they created this little kind of condominium strip along the shore, which wasn't even a buildable lot in and of itself, and they used that to sort of jimmy themselves along.
Aren't there minimum lot sizes though as a function of zoning in any area?
It's yes, it was not a buildable lot, but it is a waterfront lot, and so but that was one of the rationales that they used with B, which is we're doing you a favor because we have 4 docks and we'll only put it on 1. We should work with, I personally believe one of the things we could actually do in the dock world is work with P&Z to try to prevent that
Manipulation.
game from going on in the future.
I agree.
Because that to me was not right.
I think we made our voice heard nicely on that dock application. And the question might be just what you're asking, Jim, how do we lodge ourselves in the process going forward, either making sure that doesn't happen again, or we've tried to get on the P&Z board to do have a waterward voice in everything going by so that doesn't slip by us like it did this time.
Mm-hmm.
We made ourselves as loudly heard as we could in this 200-foot one, and still the result was nothing. I think though we could do a round 2 of coming back to not that application, but the process, and swing harder on trying to insert ourselves in the process somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just need to find out what does the town want us to do. If we're an advisory board, it's almost like, we're a consultant, and if no one wants the consulting services that we're offering, there's nothing for us to do on this topic. I mean, if Pete.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's important to raise it in the abstract, like you're suggesting, because if you go after a given property, it's almost like the situation is made for getting it down the gate, because it's more property tax, it's pleasing a big landowner, it's all those things you don't want to go against a certain person. But if you set a general rule, the screening would keep those things from happening. And so to look at this in the abstract is probably the right way to go about it. We had initially tried to get on the P&Z committee and say, every time you have something that's a water word, you need to talk to us. And I guess the harbor master's in that loop a little more officially than us, but that in the past has not proved to be any type of break. It's been pretty quick, just keeping things going along.
Mhm.
So, well, I think that's a good follow-up with Jeremy and with Monica, is to try to have some high-level screen that we get inserted in somehow.
You know, one place to keep an eye on if you're paying attention to dock permits and what's gonna happen is that phase 2 Ziegler property has waterfront, right? That
Yeah.
cove and that beach and all that, and what is,
It's ripe for what just happened, right?
what,
Yeah.
yeah, sure, right? What does that scene look like in 5 years if that's sold to a developer that puts 20 homes in there? Are they gonna want,
Mini marina.
yeah, I mean, you know, what's it look like, right? And what are they gonna be allowed to do or were they not? And, you know, it might be something to think forward to for us or the town or something about what they're gonna do with their section of waterfront access. Because if the town goes and puts in a big set of docks there, right? With a lot of footage for boats, right? That developer's gonna come back and be like, well, you did this, right?
Yeah,
So I want this.
yeah.
And it could change the,
It's a parking lot.
yeah, it could change everything. So just, I don't know if we're the right people or if that's something to make note of. If anyone else has thought about it, maybe they have, maybe they haven't, but.
I think it's a great point. I mean, it's the only undeveloped waterfront in Darien, and that's most of these other docks are redos, really, but
Yeah.
it's,
But I think this stretch goes further than Darien. It's at one point it was the biggest partial of undeveloped land on the eastern seaboard and waterfront. So there's something special about that as it is keeping it pure, right? I mean, if you want to turn it into a marina and a resort, that's one way to do it. If you want to keep it pure open space and natural land, that's another way, which I think is preferable, but two sides, right?
Yeah. Well, no, great points, and
But
I
a
feel
big
like,
developer is going to be really hard to fight.
yeah,
Especially if you have no power. So you need someone to be able to have a voice.
well, it's interesting, it's like the public's right to a beautiful shoreline and waters versus what we all also feel though is like you buy a piece of property, you should be able to do something with it, right? So it's the individuals versus the, and I do think when it comes down to any given case, once you get the real estate attorneys involved and it gets in front of P&Z, it's almost just like a sluice gate, and they make changes, they're just small changes. And so to get some action up front where we try to, I don't know what principles we can establish. Again, if we're doing a harbor management commission, and I'm not saying we should do that, but you could get us having literally a veto right on these things, and be able to stop that 200-foot one, I think could be an outcome of being a harbor commission. But that's a long road for a lot of reasons. 118 Delafield Island, I don't know if you guys had a chance to take a look at that. That looks like it was done okay. That looks like it was a pre-existing, I think 93 or 94 foot section of pier going out into Scott Cove. Really, as you just go right into Scott Cove, I think you'd hit it on the far end. And that's being torn down because it was non-compliant, my understanding of reading the application. And they're putting in what looks to be a 43-foot version. So that, to me, is almost completely conforming to the general permit where you're meant to go out no longer than 40 feet or, what's it, 4 feet water depth? Forget it. So that looks like someone's doing their job nicely there. I was thankful on that. So they're removing, I think, an old railway that went in and the old dock fixtures.
Wouldn't that have been cool to have in 1938 though? Like a marine railway with your 100-foot pier, and that was probably deeper water back then, back in Scotts Cove. I mean, it was quite the setup.
You could work on your boat in the winter.
You could do anything.
Well, I love that, yeah.
that little oyster hatchery over on Ziegler's has a little railway, I think, that goes in from that.
There was a railway at our property,
Oh, was it?
and there's still, to this day, rails down in beach.
Gotta be murder to get those out of there.
It's like narrow gauge rails.
Mhm.
Is
But
that
they're
where
all
you access
twisted,
the-
they're
the-
twisted up like spaghetti, it's amazing.
When my dad was growing up in town, he sailed with the Ziegler family and against them for a lot of years. And he remembers Bill Jr., who, and his father, Bill Sr., both had 40 and 60-foot sailboats that they would race in Long Island Sound stuff and all over, right? My dad has a very clear memory of being in Ziegler's Cove as a kid on his parents' powerboat and watching Spooky, which was Bill Ziegler Jr.'s boat, and I think it might have been Jem Sr.'s, the 60 and the 40-foot boat come in from like a Tuesday or Saturday night race, drop their sails, spin around, tie up at the dock. And watching as a kid those boats go into that barn on the Marine Railway for the wintertime. Like, pretty cool.
They must have had a hoist somewhere to take the mast off.
Marine Railway. No hoist, but we'll take the mast down, yeah,
Mast,
sure,
yeah,
somewhere,
yeah.
but they bring them up and then they move them on pipes.
Yeah, cool.
I thought you were gonna say they take it in before every race, make sure that's really
Yeah.
slick, and then send it out again.
But pretty cool.
And they're sanding and recocking every
So
season.
there's a lot of work.
All right, anyway, Delafield Island, I thought that was somewhat reassuring, the state's at work, in a good way. So last thing, sort of, we've been here before, staffing, senior staffing. So this could be a repeat from what you guys heard last year and maybe the year before, but it's an important point.
Unknown caller.
Sorry. I know what that is. The fact is that the way this commission is run almost always prior to the pandemic was a chairman and then a vice chairman and then a clerk and a shellfish commissioner. And we've actually had those roles filled for most of the time I've been on the commission, except for from pandemic on. Flip, I think, once you, I don't think it had anything to do with you, but once you left as chair, we have only had an acting shellfish chairman. We've had no vice chairman. The clerkship, I think Tom has hung on and done that for a double duty, so that's sort of unfair to him. And so I don't think that's been the healthiest turnover of people in participation. And honestly, I think we're suffering from it. I don't think like we have enough horsepower at the top to have like, well, I work on something, someone else is lining up speakers, and the clerk is not getting overly burdened by his task, but is going about it in a fresh way every season because he knows there's only 9 more meetings, that type of thing. And we're certainly hurting from not having a shellfish commissioner. Now, Eric Barrett has done a nice job. He slipped in there nicely because he's been acting shellfish commissioner, not officially appointed, but he knew the freights well, had a business relationship, and would go over there periodically and talk to freight. And so I think he has served a rather helpful role there, and he had gone out on their boat with them to dump the clams and stuff. Stuff, David, I know you've done also. So. But Eric is now living in Norwalk, and so he can't be re-upped on the commission. And I guess technically he's probably off it at this point because he's not here. I knew he's sort of phasing out. You could see him in the last meeting or two. But so that's badly needed to be filled. And before Eric and David, we'd had Bud Raleigh for 10 years or something, so he really got to know the fabric and knew when to stop listening to some of the shellfishermen and just say, do this. So it's a relationship-oriented thing, and it does take some stomach, I think, sometimes to deal with some of the issues that come up. So anyways, the question is, how do we get from where we are now, which is, I think Tom Lochtefeld, been saddled with the clerkship too long. Myself as the lone voice up here, I think I could make a more interesting commission if I had more help, or was just we were rotating people through the roles, which I think would be healthier. How do you think we get from where we are now to restocking ourselves? There's not that many of us here, and Lori's off the official list, the roster list of people.
Question, is your commission full? I mean, it sounds like you have at least one opening.
No,
More
so-
than one? What's
I
the
think-
complement, where are you on that?
Yeah, so I still don't know the answer on the Democrat versus Republicans. I didn't look at my thing, sorry. But I do know there's 2 Republican slots that are opening up for sure, and probably a third, and there might be a Democrat. So we have 3 or 4
So
slots to fill.
you're down people
We're
to
down
begin
people,
with,
yeah.
which makes
We're
it
down
tough. So
people.
the full complement should be what, 9?
I think it's 11.
Yeah, I think it's 11.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I've talked to both the DTC and the RTC about, let's bring stock in, and so their antennas are out, but I've gotten no help yet, so that's been
My
disappointing.
experience is the lag
Yeah.
time when you have an opening is very long,
Yeah, yeah.
very, very long.
So I guess one thing on this point, if you all know someone who might want to join, that would be good. Eric Barrett suggested Jack Butcher as a shellfish commissioner. He gave us he's been a road and fire guy. He gave us a lecture at one point when they wanted to buy a new boat. I think I've got the name right, Jack Butcher. And there's another pal of his from the road and fire department he thought might make a good shellfish commissioner. So I've invited them to reach out to me and talk, and so maybe I'll circulate the
Yeah, I
contact.
mean, we can also prospect at both the Norotan Yacht Club and the Boat Club, you know, because those are good pools of people typically.
Yeah, I think it would, yeah, like, for example, on the mooring stuff, we've got a lot of mooring issues coming up with what Tom is trying to do, and with the issues in front of the town, and with Ziegler's coming up. I, for example, don't feel very in tune with that anymore. I don't have a boat in the harbor. My boat goes on my car top most of the time now. So I like, I'm perking up when I'm hearing you guys talk about the boats in the harbor, and David, when you're going out on your center console. So it'd be nice to get some more, boaters, boats in the harbor.
So aren't we down to such a small amount of shellfish area now because the state's shut us down anyway?
Well, we can talk about that.
So
Second.
whoever takes over that role doesn't have quite as
I
much to
think
do.
it's gonna be reopening. They're
Oh,
working on that. Yeah, I'll give you some
Ah.
background.
Well, but also, that is the recreational shellfish area. This town still has commercial shellfish leases
Which is
that are not closed.
great.
I did see someone the other day walking the docks with a shellfish rake, and I was like, it was right after our last meeting, and I was like, oh,
Where are you going?
have you checked the website?
I got a bunch of these signs from.
And he he had his clam rake, and he was all excited, and I was sort of like, just before you dive in, I would check the website, and he was very surprised to hear that. And
Yeah, because we've made no official announcement of this at all.
Well, but I don't think we need to. I mean, okay, I want to stick to the officer
Oh,
thing.
right.
We'll come back to
Do
that.
your thing.
Yeah. So I guess, I think like first thing here, it would be great if you all could think of someone who might want to join the commission. We have 3 or 4
That's
spots,
what
and
I
you,
told
yeah, and I'll just check on the D versus the R for you, because she's a D, you're saying,
No,
Democrat.
she's an R, but
Oh, she's an R.
she's like,
Oh, I thought-
she said she'll stop being an R if that'll help. But she's like, I don't care that much.
So ridiculous we have to do that.
I thought you were saying, I thought D, I read that as a D, but anyways.
No,
yeah,
I
okay.
said last time you said you were looking for females and Democrats.
Yes, I did.
Julie, and I
Yeah,
said this, and you were looking for maybe a slightly younger person.
It's hard enough to get people. We
And
have
I
to have
said,
that rule on there.
this individual fit one of those 3 criteria.
Sorry, check, okay, good.
Well, we have
Official
open
criteria.
space on all political affiliations at the moment, so.
Right, okay, so that's not an issue, so
Yeah.
I had someone who was interested.
Good,
But the
okay.
baseline criteria is you have to be a resident of Darien,
Darien.
and then
That's
the
it.
Republican Democrat thing
There's a,
is a secondary.
no, it's a real thing,
It's a rule.
there's a real rule in the state, so you have to reflect the party in power.
Okay.
Or no, sorry, I'm forgetting the rule.
Or the population.
Of us, there can be no more than 6 people in one party, I believe.
It
Or
is,
is
I
it
think
seven?
it's 7, so I
Seven,
think
sorry.
it's an anti-tyranny kind of provision.
There's strong enough voices, so.
So what it means is that the majority party who's governing the town cannot have more than 7 out of our 11 seats.
Okay.
So which practically speaking means we need 4 Democrats.
And we got called on it at before you came on.
Really?
Yeah, we did. I got a call from Wayne
It's
Fox.
like, when does this ever come up?
Well, I got a call
Same
from
thing
Wayne,
with the
we haven't
first.
done it by design, right, but it's
No.
the drift of people coming and leaving, and he called to check and found we were out of compliance, and so that was, you brought us back in.
Oh, thank the
Um,
Lord.
I
So-
switched my affiliation
So
recently.
We counted on that. Well, no, you, not
Just,
back to the
just
public.
frustrated? Is that where you
Yeah.
went from left to right to just frustrated?
Is that a category?
Disgruntled?
So you let me know if you're changing again, because
I will.
you helped out the process here.
But you can also have open slots that are, I mean, it doesn't have to be actually seated, I don't think it has to be actually seated commissioners. If you have an open Democrat slot, for instance.
Yeah,
Because
Wait a
you
minute, I'm
don't,
not
I
sure.
don't think you have a Democrat resign and
As long as
then cause a Republican to resign.
no, that's
Stay
true,
in
that would be
power.
true, but I got a little chastised on
It
how,
just means when the positions get filled. It's-
I'm not, I think Wayne was less patient than that. I think he talked about needing to fill also, that it can't remain out of
Well, the
balance.
DTC and the RTC can fill them.
Yeah, well, that's true,
And they
at
need to
any
fill
point,
it.
just
Yeah.
pop, yeah.
Like faster than they do.
So anyway, we should get more people. If you can think of some more, you have, it's great. If you guys got a name or two, Eric, with the suggestion of a couple firemen for the shellfishing, I thought that was pretty good.
Maybe there were two candidates for the harbor master position. Maybe the guy who didn't get it would be interested.
That's a really good idea. It's a runner-up prize, maybe more pleasurable than the real job.
Yes, pays better than the real job.
Yeah. And, well, then the question though is our own organization, and we've got to figure out a way to stock the top 4 roles better. I think for us to be more vibrant as a committee. Just on a personal note, I've been way overcommitted this year for a new career I started. For me to think of continuing in the overcommitment that I've had, I just don't think I'm doing this enough justice. I don't want to leave the commission. I love the work we do. But I think there could be someone who would dedicate more time than I'm able to and really do a kick job. So, but I think it's healthy for us to be rotating. I don't see why, Flip should be 4 years and I should be 4 years. I mean, maybe just we have a top guy in there for 2 years and we all rotate. This is not a big hierarchy thing. I think we're all contributing from our own experience and stuff, and people step up at different times. So I think it'd be healthy to figure out a way we stock the top 4 and not think of it as a life sentence, but something that goes on for a couple of years. So, anyway, so why don't we just leave that as food for thought? I'd say on the submitting names, if you actively have some people, let's actively work on that now, setting up for next season, but food for thought on who might step up and do more of an officer role. I think that'd be great to make progress on that next month and the month after, and have that sort of put to bed before we all wake up in 23 and start again. And with that, I would move on to the Harbor Master's report, which maybe
Which I will not give, but I will share my own reflections on what has gone on out in the harbor in the summer, which is, I think the harbor master has been making good progress in straightening up our house out there on the water. It's not always been without friction. I now understand that having a mooring is like getting married or buying a house. It's like one of these high emotional content things. So when you challenge somebody's right to have a mooring, there's quite a bit of emotion that gets involved in that. But I think that John has been making good progress in terms of documenting who actually has what moorings, and there have been a number of boats that have been either reassigned in the mooring field or bumped out of the mooring field, but it really all gets to having the paperwork in place to document that the right people are on the right moorings. So there are a number of existing mooring spaces that are empty and have been empty for a good portion of the summer. There are probably 4 or 5 winter sticks that are still in, which demonstrate that those mooring owners didn't even use their mooring this year. So there's gonna be a decent amount of activity. I think the harbor master quite consciously was not assigning those in the middle of the summer because many people who didn't have moorings had already gotten slips. And if you were, you know, at the front of the line and had already gotten a slip, it's not fair to let other people behind you kind of come up and get the moorings. So I think he will start next season fresh, and he'll get all of those mooring spots populated. I continue to believe that there are at least 20 new mooring spaces that are not occupied by existing boats and moorings that we will continue to try to put people in next summer. They're not surprisingly frequently farther out in the mooring field. They're not as choice as other moorings, but for people who are on the wait list, you know, maybe they want to do that. So I think there's good progress being made, but it's going to take a while to get everything sort of cleaned up and orderly. Also, I think definitely for us, working with the Harbor Commission over the winter off-season, kind of completing the mooring standard review to see if we want to change any of the specifications. I think that is good work task for everybody. I know that the Norotan Yacht Club mooring crew has spent a lot of time working on the moorings and has definitely had some thoughts about how things get constructed and how we should change our kind of standards. They're not huge changes, but they're definitely things to do.
Is that in particular Hank? Is he really been quite instrumental?
Hank and Scott Van Dusen.
Okay.
Scott's actually kind of spearheading the mooring servicing business right now.
So Flip, what's the governance around that? You know, Hank and Scott make a recommendation, here's the spec we ought to follow, you know, by boat length or whatever it might be. Who needs to approve that specification?
So I don't know that I have 100% the answer to that, but at least the last time it was done, it was sort of a cooperative effort between the harbor master, the coastal commission, and Jeff Eng at the time, who was running the moorings for Norotan. It was sort of a collective effort.
What's been nice about, I thought, the update that is occurring, that you've been involved in, and Dusen and Hank, you've taken a look at different aspects of this, like the wear and tear, the maintenance, not just the upfront spec, but how these things are being maintained. I think that's been fresh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually one of the most significant changes in my mind. It doesn't even show up on our current spec sheet. It's just in terms of how things are serviced on an annual basis.
Mm-hmm.
Are they changing any of their thoughts on like periodicity? It's like every 3 years, right? You think any of that's going to...
No, I don't
okay.
think that changes.
All right. Understood.
You know, the other thing to keep thinking about for us working with the harbor master is the organization of the harbor and the moorings, whether we should be creating zones that are more small boat zones that are power boat zones that are sailboat zones, things like that, so that you can get more efficient packing of the boats into the harbor.
You think John's pursuing that?
I think he's starting to work on that.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are definitely, we've seen a couple of new boats show up on moorings where they're much bigger than the prior boat, and it just takes up a lot of space.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there's anything written in stone at this point, but that's another area of thought and work that we can all participate in, how to pack the harbor better.
Yeah. I'm concerned that John's not here because I think this is such a good intersection of what we do. And
Is there body of, I don't know, science with the right word of sort of like, what's the minimum amount that moorings should be
No,
away from each
there's
other?
not.
But shouldn't
We,
there be?
a number of us, I think last year, wasn't it? It all blends together, but I think it was last year, a number of us, like, actually identified harbors up and down the coast and either called their harbor masters or went online and got their mooring specifications. Everybody does it differently, and some of the harbors are very protected. We are on the more exposed extreme. So everything that we do should be scaled up, not average. But it's, some people use concrete blocks for moorings, some people use mushroom anchors. Our spec, if you read it, is for pyramid anchors, although at least half the harbor is still with mushroom anchors that have kind of been grandfathered. And,
Well, you had, on top of it all, you've had COVID too, so there was a big shortage of that stuff.
yeah,
Like,
well,
wasn't it
and,
this spring that, or was it last year that there was like, just, it was hard to get anything?
well, you still have a hard time getting,
Yeah,
um,
either or.
like moorings, the big moorings, they're now coming from China, and the quality of the metal in a Chinese mooring isn't going to rust faster than the American moorings. But there's not, the point is, there's not a black and white rule on what's the best practice.
It just seems there needs to be some sort of minimum that if the boats swing or in different directions or whatever, that you could never physically.
Well, so
Yeah.
we
It's
did,
interesting. Coastal Consulting.
have Coastline Consulting, which is a coastal engineering firm, come out and tour the mooring field with us. Bill, your goal in doing that was to see if we could pack more boats in.
Is there a science, you
And-
drop radiuses and,
Right.
yeah.
And he sort of ran away with his tail between his legs saying, don't pack more boats. Because we have, ideally, you would have radiuses around each mooring, and the radiuses don't intersect, and so there's no way they can hit. But that is not very, you lose mooring spaces when you space them out.
Understood.
So it's
So they overlap.
a balance of how do you mostly
Bigger
get them so
buffers.
that they don't hit.
And if you have boats that, work together, like they're all deep drafts, so they're all surface,
I don't know if they worked, this is just completely anecdotal, but we were in Marblehead last summer, which is very packed. And we were literally next to our exact same boat, and we were swinging like this and
It's,
almost.
Oh, really?
I think in our harbor, it's much less the boat configuration and much more the interplay between the currents and the wind. And we have, if you look at our harbor when the tide is going out, it's like a river from Goodwives River that flows down the channel. And that river of moving water kind of flows up around the banks into the mooring fields. And where that stops, you can, if it's in very light wind, you can have a boat one way pointing into the current this way, and 10 feet away, a boat going the exact opposite way, because there's a back eddy there. And I think it's those two things, and it just means we have a very challenging harbor, and you can't pack them in as tight. So the Norotan launch operators and the mooring guys are they're watching the boats, and they will see boats that are getting close to touching. We just moved one mooring like 10 days ago to try to create a little bit more space. So it's a more of an art than a science, unfortunately.
I was totally convinced by that, because the Coastline guys who first came to us selling how they had computer technology,
Right.
which would draw these circles and
Right.
put in your displacement and your whole profile and then draw your little radius. Like Flip said, they
He just ran away.
I think they said to us they
Right.
could not guarantee they would get more boats in our harbor than we already had. They thought, in other words, they were putting a boat towards the intuitive, which is
Yeah, I mean, you can understand how on a graphic, on a charting software, you can run circles and
Yeah.
space them out, but that will actually take moorings out of our
Right.
harbor if you do that. So that's, we're trying to, I guess, manage it so that people don't hit, but at the same time pack them. I mean, if everybody pointed in the exact same direction all the time,
Very easy.
you could pack them much closer. And so we're trying to find the happy medium right now, which is not scientific. It's just watching what's happening out there.
I interpret that as everybody should get a sailboat, just, certain profile.
And the only place where they double moor, 4.5, is back in the gut and frigates boats. Everybody else is free swinging.
Yeah, and then there's also double moorings up Goodwise River for those very shallow moorings.
Because besides the current running so fast, they block people off going to and fro. It's not that wide.
It would be interesting, and I think for transparency, which is always so important in town, I've learned in different activities during the year, is for the harbor master to come with a report. He's had certain months. I know he's reached out to people. I know we certainly were asked to provide documentation, and just heard a lot of things from a lot of people over the summer, and just say, okay, and I don't know what the number of moorings is in town. You probably do flip it, whether
It's like 200.
200, okay, so of the 200 moorings, after reaching out to people, we found that, 83%, the right boat belonging to the right people that was properly documented was on its mooring. And then, another 6%, right people are mooring, but maybe whatever, but just start with the fact, like, it would be nice to, what are the facts, because there's a lot of
I believe
chatter
the
and
harbor master
discussion.
would have that.
But that's what I'm saying, it would be nice if he could come and report that to us,
This is a
to
point
the
we,
selectmen,
Yep.
to other sort of appropriate, the yacht club should probably, or you would report as, I think, the Freshie Yacht Club representation, the boat club, but sort of what are the facts? Because there's a lot of chatter going around, a lot of mystery. And then, okay, so then we found, there's A, people have lent, they're lending their moorings out, or B, people, whatever. And then really understand, okay, what are the rules about how we handle this? I mean, some of us have heard situations about there's moorings that have been in a family. And it's like, well, it's been in the family, and that caused some problems this summer. Or whatever, but it would be great if he could come and really report, these are the facts, and then understand, the waiting list.
well, at his start, John, Monica and I met, and we talked about all this, that
Okay.
transparency is needed in the harbor.
Right.
People aren't feeling so hot about this.
No.
I'm convinced that John is going at things. He's
He is.
He's turning stones over and not
Yep.
ignoring.
Yep. No, I'm not implying he's not at
Yeah.
all, but
No, but I'm not
because there's
convinced.
been so much chatter over the last
Yeah.
few months, I think the
The
sooner
reporting
the
of this is
reporting out,
important.
this is what we found, because then it gives the transparency, and the people really understand, the fairness of the situation. How many were that it was, some family member was on the mooring, but not, the right
Listed.
family member. We heard situations about, co-ownership of boats, but the co-ownership had really never been formally documented. I mean, I've heard all the stories this summer, so. But just really kind of understand as a starting point what's happening, and then what's the fairest way to work through them, which what I understand is it's his role, not ours.
And
but-
we left that meeting in Monaco with John pledging to report back in a public forum to the Board of Selectmen his progress, and I saying how important that was because of these feelings. People aren't feeling like things are on the up and up. So, I mean, I'm disappointed he's not here tonight, because I think he's regularly attending this and then regularly reporting to the Board of Selectmen is needed for the appearance of proper things going on, which I think they are, but he needs to broadcast it. So I think I can make a point back to Monica that we need this to proceed. And I'll relay that to her, because this is where we started out with them just a couple of months ago. So it's a good point. I mean, do you think you see specific things that are bothering you? Like,
It's
I
not
know,
bothering me, I'm just
Just what
telling
you're
you
hearing, yeah.
conversations I've
Yeah.
heard and been a part of
No,
over the summer,
but
because
I
they
think
know I'm
these are all
closely
the
involved.
things you're referring to are
Yeah.
well
Yeah.
known among the people who are there.
you know, this is what he's been going after and getting frustrated, right? So at certain points.
Well, I don't know that he's getting frustrated, but he's trying to address these sort of
Yeah.
things.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so it is a fair system, and everybody feels that it's
Yeah,
fair.
I mean, everybody should understand, there's ultimately always gonna be some, what I call discretion, because it's not ever good, because all of the moorings are not the same. There's small boat moorings, there's medium-sized boat moorings, there's big boat moorings that are farther out. So that keeping people, when people say, well, what's the wait list? And they, frequently you'll hear an answer that's like a single thing. There's 250 boats on the wait list, whatever it is. That's not really the way it works, because there's boats that only want the inner moorings, and then there's boats that want the outer moorings. And so for them, it's almost, maybe there's almost no wait list in the outer moorings, because there's not that many big boats coming in looking for moorings. So there's always an interplay between these things that make it a little bit qualitative, make it a little bit subjective. That's just the way it has to be. But I think what the harbor master is doing is getting us so that it's, you're prepared to talk about how it works and it makes sense and seems fair to
Absolutely,
people.
yeah. I'm just saying, because
Yeah.
there's been a lot of chatter this summer, probably the sooner that the findings can be documented and made public and a path forward would probably be better. Just I've heard numerous comments about people were told, well, if you have a dock or your own dock, you shouldn't also have a mooring. Now, is that just someone's thinking? Is there a rule about, I mean, there's just been a lot over the summer that I think it would be great, to just kind of get the facts
I find
out
it,
there.
this is editorial, I find it irritating that he's an employee of the state. I know we have town ordinances about how he's meant to report to us, but I find it irritating that, I guess, if we were Harbor Management Commission, an official commission, we might have a carved out role in this. That might be nice. I find it irritating that there's a guy who's working for the state who's dictating what's happening in our harbors. It'd be nice to claw more of that back. But
I don't know if you guys experience that, and I'm just an ex officio member here, but people sort of know I sit in or I'm involved, and they associate with Park and Rec, whatever. So just kind of people come to you and they talk and they whatever. So, and I don't know if you guys, I'm sure all get that as well, but.
that's it. At parties, you get that. People, what goes on in the harbor? I've been on this wait list forever, and then I see new boats show up. You get that type of thing. I think whether it's all true or not, there's a feeling, a perception, and that's what we talked about with Monica and John, that more needs to come out. And I think part of the problem is it's state, and part of the problem is it's just the harbor and people don't know about it.
Do you have to prove ownership of a boat to even get on the waiting list?
Mm.
Right. So again, there's 250 people, well,
Yeah, I mean, so that's what I'm saying, when people ask simple questions like, how long is the waiting list? And you get a number of whatever it is. It's really like
Right.
misleading any single
Right.
number. It's much more complicated than that, because the harbor master will call people and say, okay, I've got a mooring, and sometimes people will then go out and buy a boat, sometimes they won't go out and buy a boat, and, it's all over the place.
oh,
Can a family member
25 years ago, we, got that call, and you get a mooring, and you're like, well, better go get a boat
I
quick.
wonder what the list was like. Let's say October of 19 or September of 19, right?
Yeah, I believe that it has grown.
What that
with
jump was like
people
during COVID,
who
right?
have bought boats,
Yeah.
but it has been steadily growing
Yeah.
over time. I mean, it's not just a COVID sort of thing.
Can a family have two moorings? Family member have two moorings?
Yes, there are people who have two moorings.
I think some people have three, right? Like one in Scott. And
Some
Well,
people.
It's the main harbor mainly.
There's a limited number of people who have three. But there's
There are people
there's
that do it in
there's
Harvard.
long stories behind
Right.
Oh, yeah.
all of those, and many of those people who have 2 and 3 moorings have had them for decades.
And the club has a certain number of moorings for their boats that
The
they
Road and
use.
Yacht Club has a certain number of moorings too.
There's so many questions around it, and it's a concern. I'm not going to express a view, but should a family have, when there's a waiting list, should have family have more than one, and right, people can debate it and.
Well, this is like,
But are there rules around it? Does just a philosophical discussion have to be made, kind of,
but there's
things of
no,
those
there
nature?
are no rules around, I mean, one of the issues that I know the harbor master has run into is, in essence, there are no rules.
And he's got no rules from the state.
He doesn't have
Oh.
rules from the state, the town's rules are set forth on like 3/4 of a page,
Right.
which, so it doesn't, the town's rules don't have a lot of detail to them.
That's why I would say, I think actually, we probably are in the best place to make a rule and to say, this should be done, harbor master and board of selectmen.
I
Well,
don't,
and you would
I
have,
don't know, I
ideally,
don't
that there's-
exactly know how the
No, but.
authority works, but.
I don't either. I mean, I've seen reporting that the harbor master should report to the board of selectmen on the good operations of the moorings and that sort of thing.
Wouldn't you like to have rules, probably?
Yeah, I believe you
You
would,
probably
so,
But are
But the
we so
question
well
is-
equipped to do it?
Like, who has the authority to create the rules, and none of us know, but then
Yeah.
the process you would go through would be one or more series of public hearings, and that's what we certainly do with anything significant with parks, then you're getting the input from the community, and just, because people are gonna have different views, should a family be able to have more than one mooring, or this or that, or, I mean, just all sorts of things, but, and then
well, and it gets,
somebody,
one of the
by
issues
rule.
that's really a third rail is if you have if you have your boat on either your own dock or in a slip in Rowayton, for instance, can you have a mooring?
Right.
And so that's definitely a third rail.
Yep,
issue.
absolutely, yeah. There's just,
And
there's so
I
many of these
think-
third rails.
I think the harbor master has tried to address that at times this summer, but without a set of rules, it's hard for him to have authority on it.
I think the scheme we've got, that there's a lot of expertise involved in this. So Northern Yacht Club is inputting a huge amount of expertise and knowledge of the harbor. John's got authority to do something. And I think we're on the right track if we can keep this in compliance with him reporting to the Board of Selectmen, us hearing regularly from him, and there being a lot of discussion on this. But at the moment, I don't think the discussion's happening.
Yeah. The other question is, are there, the concept of, I heard some scuttle this or about, sort of guest moorings, and whether somebody comes in from out of town, they need, a place to stay for the night. And I heard one story, and again, I just, if you're hearing at different places that people were somehow called in and said, yes, so-and-so's away, you can use this, mooring for the night, and then, they were kicked off saying, no, you can't be, and again, this could be a total fabrication and not true, but it's unfortunate, there's just a lot of this discussion going on in town, but, what, are there guest moorings in town, or who has the authority to?
There's no town guest mooring.
If a ship coming or whatever, I mean, we certainly were in a couple instances this summer where we concluded we really needed to get off the water, and we found some communities that were, that last summer too, you had a hurricane come in and we needed to go somewhere, and the town of Newburyport was unbelievably accommodating to us. So you really think about that, and how do we want to be as a community? We were out this summer and decided we wanted to get off the water, and another yacht club, they were just, we called, they said, yep, we'll make space for you, and they said, look, if we can take care of a boat when the conditions are bad, we will always do that. And, is that the kind of community we want to be? I mean, things about that need to be thought about too.
Right. I don't think it is, actually, not because we don't want to be civil like
Yeah.
that, but it would be much better for us to send them to Stamford or Norwalk, because their harbors are much better. Our harbor is such a bad harbor that we shouldn't be encouraging people to use our harbor as a shelter.
Yeah.
But there are guest moorings in the harbor for people like who want to come over from Long Island, spend the night or whatever.
There are.
But
That Norotan Yacht Club has.
But it used to be like, I mean, when I worked at the Road Yacht Club, it used to be that if someone was coming through, or there was a yacht club member who had a friend coming through for a week and they needed a layover or something, if someone else was cruising, it was okay for that mooring to be used by someone in a transient.
And I believe a certain amount of that still occurs, but you can understand how that could go way wrong.
Well, yes, and
When-
what I was
when
what I
that-
was gonna say is, I think to your point earlier, where like there are rules, right, and then there's this certain amount of discretion, where it comes in where you say like, listen, like, if you have a mooring, your boat should be on it so that you're using it. That sort of makes sense. A follows B. But if you're not using it because you're cruising or something else is going on, then like it can be used in a temporary fashion with a
But
limited
then it
basis.
gets
But
into,
like,
are you actually collecting releases and waivers from all the
Yeah.
people who are using that? So
I mean,
that
I don't know, I
when your
mean-
mooring breaks in the middle of a storm and they go up on the rocks,
But I mean,
They
the
don't
Roten
sue you.
Yacht Club was, there were
that's the,
yeah, I
what,
guess if
15 boats this weekend, Saturday night, and most of us were guests and moorings at Centerport Yacht Club. And
Yeah.
they, they welcome us, and you get use their launch service, and they take you in, and it's
Well,
wonderful.
the
you
Roten-
don't
And-
welcome you,
and-
you pay a fee for that.
Oh, yeah, you pay for it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so
the Roten
it,
has six
okay,
guest moorings.
okay.
So,
But again, you wonder, part of that is so, when Roten's out on the cruise for 2 weeks and, the manager there knows there's 12 boats that are gone for the next 16 days, do they have the abilities, it's sort of, again, within the rules, if someone calls in and says, gee, I'm passing through on my way to Mystic, didn't make good time today, the Roten Yacht Club on a reciprocal club, can I, and he knows, yep, I know the Boers are gone, let me pop them on their mooring, is that okay or not?
Well-
And again, I've
well,
heard different
generally,
things.
we're trying to do them on club moorings so
Yeah.
that they're maintained to club specs
The
and
club
not,
maintains our mooring.
what?
The club maintains my mooring.
Yeah, correct, but sometimes people don't, if you're in the wrong position on the 3-year cycle, I mean, it gets much more complicated, I think, to have people use private moorings that, just from a litigation and liability point of view. So versus the club owning the asset and having a release that they have people sign and they pay for it. And, that's different than just sort of a loaner mooring that, Bob is out this weekend and use his mooring. A certain amount of that does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't, but as a general matter. But if you're talking about sheltering people from bad weather, we should not encourage them to come to Darien.
I don't even want to be there.
Yeah, go to Stanford, get behind a breakwater.
Well, I think the long and the short of it, we need John to regularly address us, and we need to be hearing what he's saying to the selectmen too. And I think it would have been great for him to hear all this and for us to learn more from him.
Should watch the tape.
There you go. Should we move on to shellfish? So, all good on the mooring topic? Yeah. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us on mooring stuff, which I think it is a good input area for us. So you last know that this was our situation. All shellfishing in Darien was yanked.
Recreational show.
Recreational shellfishing, sorry, yeah, back in, was it beginning of summer, was it just June?
Sounds right.
Yeah. The woman who works in this, Alyssa Dragon for CT Deep, always said when she yanked it that it was, it's hard for me to characterize this is such arcane bureaucratic science, but that it was a bureaucratic move, that the FDA was coming down to review all her reports, that Darien had failed 10% or more of the tripwire, of its bacteria testings around Scott Cove and Ziegler's, and that necessitated for her to shut us down by the rules of FDA, and so that they were coming down to look at all her books. She knew that meant that she had to close us down, so they did. They just closed us like that without any warning. David Carey was slightly apologetic about that to David Knopf, because it was without warning. But they basically said to us that it was a sort of bureaucratic move, that they thought, literally they did say this, Alyssa said to me, she thought with more testing and work on her behalf, it would be reopened again. And so you're sort of left with, what's this mean? David and I both talked about this and had great concern, maybe we all talked about it in the commission, I'm forgetting, that there might be people going down in shellfishing when this sign should be plastered over everything on the shore by the shellfish beds, at the boat launch where we have our 2 explanatory placards about what to do. I was thinking of just literally maybe pasting this on the placards to keep people from going. And then there's also the question of like swimming off of Great Island. We've got those shellfish bed closures to contamination. Do you want people swimming off their boats in Ziegler or off their boats in Scott? Yeah, the whole thing's nerve-wracking, right? Well, so I called up Alyssa and I roped in David Knopf, and the amount of contamination they're talking about with regard to shellfish doesn't come close to affecting human swimming. So we weren't talking about that level of concern, so that was one nice thing to not feel we have to like clear the coves during the summer. But Alyssa also went on and strongly, I've got emails to this effect, said that she thought she could do an amount of survey work that would clear us, that would get us back on the FDA's good list and make us a conditionally approved shellfishing area, which means that they put a standard in for rainfall, and as long as it hasn't rained, let's say, 1.5 inches in a 24-hour period, they keep you open. If it's rained 1.5 inches, there's enough runoff from the surrounding coves and the potential for drainage off lawns and cesspool areas that they would deem it closed for 24 hours. So she said, and that's already been the case, that our shellfish beds have been conditional approvals that I think the trip is 1.5 inches.
Used to be 3.
Yeah, I think Flip's right. I think it used to be 3, which is like a crazy amount of rain.
Wouldn't it be great?
Well,
if
it's
we got
like-
an
I think
inch
it
and a
came
half of
down.
rain?
Well, we get 3 all the time these days.
And that's 3 in a certain time period?
24 hours.
I think that's right.
And you're always meant, these are conditionally approved. You look on the chart and it says conditionally approved, and you are meant to call a number before you go shellfishing. You're meant to say, whoa, did it rain? And call. That's the standing rule for using our shellfish beds. They're dangerous otherwise. You shouldn't be shellfishing if there's been a rain event. You should always give a call. So Alyssa basically was saying she thinks she did say she thinks that in that same category, but she's got these bureaucratic hoops she has to jump through to get them back there because of the FDA's rules. So her bureaucratic hoops first started off with doing sampling, which she did on August 11th in her waters, and said the samples came back positive enough that she's going to go forward with this application to FDA to
When you
correct
say
this.
positive,
Favorable.
clean.
Favorably,
Favorable.
yeah, sorry, not COVID positive. Thank you. So she said, I'm confident you're going to get conditionally reapproved, but I need to do this extra survey work, and they may, which is now not the testing, but some additional survey, and they may require me to even write this longer report. And per her email here, she said, I'm still without enough human resources because of COVID and people quitting. I don't know when I can yet get to this. So she's done the testing, which makes her confident we're going to get there, but she hasn't done the final paperwork, which she talks about taking the fall. So this is an understaffed, undermanned CT deep. And so I'm left the feeling that we really haven't had a change in our beds and the conditional approval, but the bureaucratic paperwork has to get caught up before they can reclassify us as conditional approval. So I've got like a dozen of these in my basement. I asked for like 3 and they sent a dozen. And I just didn't put them up through August. I don't, technically, yes, no shellfishing, but we are basically where we have been for the last couple of years.
Is there a season that the shellfishing sort of ends, or like could you go out there in the fall or the winter months? Yeah.
And if you follow the
Get the
rules,
water, it's cold.
Well, yeah. No, I mean,
and if you do that now and follow the rules, you dial the number, which you're always meant to do when you get.
Gonna say it's
It's
close.
going to say don't use it.
Yeah.
And
But the number, the test numbers show it's not really a public safety issue right now. It's more of a paperwork issue right now.
yeah. So
But if it's closed, and it's not for us to.
Yeah, and if we're not
Second
posting the
guess.
closure, doesn't that make us liable?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, do we have an obligation to post?
well, I don't know.
But
David
where would you
Knopf and I.
post?
Where would you post for one?
You
could
cannot
put. I've got these. David Knopf, like me, we both were sort of. You're meant to call. It's no condition hasn't changed.
Where do we have
There
the signs
are-
up
we
with
do
the
have to
shellfish
park-
There are
instructions?
signs like that posted along the shore of Goodwives River.
Yeah, I stapled those up.
When they get a permit,
Well,
doesn't
you-
it say
you
on the
staple
town that you
yours.
have to call that number anyway?
Yeah,
Because though I get the one from Norwalk when I was up there, and it said, anytime you go out,
Yep.
you need to call. So it's kind of at the user's, problem if
And-
they
and-
don't make the phone call.
and they're not in any worse state than they were over the last 2 or 3 years under our.
Right, but they'll call now and say they can't use it at least. At least they'll get that call. So posting is probably not as required as people if they have a permit. If they legally have a permit, they should be calling.
And you get those instructions from David Knopf when you get your permit, if you're.
So it's the
one of
same as normal.
If you're one of the few people who actually gets the permit.
Yeah.
But then there are those that never get permits.
I mean, I was left indifferent. It's not a great situation, but I'm not sure it's a bad situation. I felt, I've got these signs, I felt putting them on our, literally duct taping them on our placards was sort of overreaction.
Well, I honestly feel if we've got signs posted in the parks, here's how to shellfish, and then they say you gotta call, I kind of feel like that sign needs to go up. Like at least next to the, here's how to do it personally. I'm a little uncomfortable having responsibility for parks to have a little thing of here's how you go, here's what to do, folks,
Yeah.
and not posting with.
I agree with Lori. I think
I'm
if
uncom-
one
I'm
person gets
uncomfortable with
really
that.
sick, and they say, well, it was clear that they were shut, no one posted anything. I mean, it's unlikely, but
Did they have a permit to start with? It said you need to call anyway. It's the ones that don't have a permit that are gonna have a problem, because they're gonna go around the rules anyway.
I mean, if you go back to the way you're describing the conditional approval that we've had for 3 years, or whatever, I'm guessing the beds were shut down and reopened a number of times, based upon rain events.
Yes, I would say, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 times a year
So, I mean,
during the season.
I don't know if it's been that much for Darien, given the rain trigger, but there are any number, I get these messages or these notices from the state with some frequency, and they're shutting one bed or another down every time there's a big rainfall. It happens constantly.
But I thought we were 3 inches anymore. I thought they changed it like a year and a half ago to 1.5 inches. It was a lesser number.
They may have, I don't know.
I remember we jumped and we're like, what? I thought that was a big thing. And I think they might have done that because it was failing. We had a series of years we were getting that 10% trigger. Anyway, maybe I got that.
my only point is, on the posting, I mean, I certainly, I can hear arguments from both sides, but if we're gonna insist on posting right now, because we've got a bureaucratic thing keeping us from reopening the beds, we've gotten there's been a good test result. I think once you post it with the yellow signs like that, we're kind of signing up to do that forever.
But where are you gonna post that?
Well, I mean, that's a good question too, but if let's say you stuck it up near the boat club, near the,
But that's stuck up near the boat club on the telephone pole,
A
right?
pilot, yeah.
Right, and,
Saying don't do it here.
yeah, exactly, right? I mean, if you wanna put up a sign that says don't shellfish, you have to be very specific about where not to shellfish, because you can't shellfish in probably 99% of Darien to begin with, right? So,
The
you
only
can't go
place-
sticking those up on Great Island, or Contentment Island, because that's private property, right? So where are you gonna put it? You could put a little note right on those 2 little placards, one by the boat ramp and one by the boat club, but how many people are gonna look at that anyway? I don't know.
And those signs are out of date, and they might be out of date after this gets corrected, because there's been a whole reconfiguration of the map, and I'm not sure if our map will even, post this approval will be correct.
what does the sign say?
What about freights, the other towns? They never had a problem with contamination, other than they shut down too, I assume, after a certain amount of rain?
They're in deeper water, more offshore. Shore. The problem is that the town, because for recreational
Yeah, gotta be
clamming,
shallow.
you've got to be shallow.
Right.
We're in Ziegler's
We're in the zone.
Cove or Scott's Cove.
Yep. Yeah, so freight probably goes like Norm Bloom does, that when they get shut down after a certain amount of rain, it affects theirs, and unless they're way out deep, then it's more rain
Yeah, I
required.
don't know exactly how
I think,
big.
there are all these little plots, I mean, it's like real estate on the bottom of the ocean, and I think everyone's different depending on where it's located.
And I'm amazed the state is that efficient about shutting and closing down that quickly off of rain checks. You know, I just find it hard to believe
Well,
that.
they've got this system and they blast out these notices to the commissions and to the commercial people as well.
They close the swimming too after a big rainstorm for 24 hours.
But that's the town does that, right? Versus the state on.
Under deep guidance.
Oh, Deep gets involved with that too, on the swimming? Oh, I thought that was all town. Okay, thanks.
So I hear you both, but David Knopf doesn't also know what to do. He's like, where do we put these signs? No situation's changed anyway. I don't think he's being protective of the town's, like Great Island purchase or anything, you know, like, oh, the water's off the Great Island, they're contaminated. I honestly think we both are like, well, the system exists already, that you're meant to pick up the phone. And where do you put these signs? Who's gonna notice them?
It's not so much who's gonna notice them as that you put people on notice.
But how? How are we gonna do this effectively?
I think at least where we have the two signs that have shellfish.
Just right on this
It
plan.
says, disclaimer.
Just tape them right over the placards at this point.
But to the point Jim was making earlier, this periodic closure, we're in like this big bureaucratic snafu right now, whatever, which is going for a period of time. But these shellfish beds also equally close for, periodically throughout the year when they get rainstorms, with the exact same analysis and the exact same public safety risk. So would we be putting these signs up every time it rains?
You don't want to be doing that.
And then pulling them down when you're in the clear. I mean, it's a precedent you're setting.
Maybe another way to do this is, well, first of all, many people don't look at those signs who go shell fishing because they have boats at the Road Yacht Club or elsewhere, so they just don't even see them. But maybe we should review the verbiage that's on the sign and make sure we have some big language that says, these things do get closed, please call the number before you go. I don't know, I have never seen the signs myself.
I know they say call the shellfish hotline at the bottom, I know we put that in there.
So maybe if,
What if you put that up and you, with a big Sharpie or something, you put a date on it? As of,
well,
Or
but
throughout
the point
or as
is,
of 9/1 or something?
every couple months
It's
they
gonna
close.
close, yeah.
So we can't, I don't think you can be doing it every time it's closed on a conditional basis. It's too
No,
much
but when
work.
you have this like blanket closure and you haven't told anyone, I feel
But
like
we
that
have-
puts us in a
this isn't-
vulnerable position.
In a sense, this isn't any more blanket than any other closure that we have. This is just taking longer because there's more paperwork involved.
I agree, but the optics would be bad if something happened and we hadn't posted anywhere that suddenly the SBA I think it would put the town in an awkward position.
Curiously, the only reason we found out about this is because someone called the shellfish hotline and found that it was closed and then sent me an email saying, why is it closed? I have no idea.
Yeah, and she's been
It is?
apologetic from the start. Alyssa's been, we don't have enough people, COVID, I haven't been able to do the testing, FDA's coming, gotta shut it down. It's been a paperwork chase. You can feel it, she tells it, she's embarrassed by it, that she's doing her best.
I can appreciate what you're saying. I ran a review function for 20 years. And seriously, you send a letter to a unit saying, guess what, we're coming in 2 weeks to review your files, and you know what they're doing. They're papering that's the way life is. So I get that, but the fact of the matter is, she had to close our shellfish beds because we didn't pass the rules, and I'm just concerned. So we have in the park signs saying, here's how you can go shellfishing, and maybe from the bottom,
Why don't
and
we
we have
just
signs that
take
we're
the
not
signs
posting.
down?
So that would be, you should take the signs down, but
But
as I said,
taking the signs down is the better solution.
It's a liability pull out.
If you're worried that
That's
the
about
signs are kind of like advertising the shellfishing,
That's what, I guess that's my
But
feeling.
why don't we
Whether
take-
it's
You
a
gotta
good way
take
to
them
put it.
down online too. You've got maps online, you've got here's, the recreational shellfishing opportunities in Darien on the town website. I mean,
right, but those,
But that should be
everything does
updated
say, I
with a
mean,
banner
we,
right
it
now.
would be interesting to look at a picture of those signs, because I don't know exactly what they say, but it's certainly on the town's website, when you go to the health department to get a license, you've gotta call this number. So, I mean, that disclaimer is there, and you say that that's on the signs too.
I created the sign actually in PowerPoint, so I can probably pull it up.
If it's on the town website, then we need to understand whose responsibility it is to update that section of the website
But
every
it's
time.
not update, it's
But
not
what I'm saying, for
updated.
instance, if the beaches are closed because of a rain, the Parks and Rec section of the town website is updated that day, saying the beaches are closed today. Now, do people go in I don't
But
know.
that's,
but
it's set up differently in shellfishing, which is it's more user, the burden of figuring it out is on the shellfish license holder,
Right.
right? Which is not like, we're not sending you a blast email, you need to call the number and figure out if it's open or, that's there, that is functioning and that's working.
Do people actually call? Is that,
That, you hear Dave, it's like, that's how we figured this out to begin with.
But the
Well,
people,
that's one person.
people get licenses.
But
It's
the-
not
That's
even
one
one
person.
person.
But it's the
Shellfishing,
same,
there's
but it's
a
the same
chance of
thing,
getting a
people.
That same guy.
If you don't call, you get a chance of a ticket, which is probably rare, or you're gonna get sick, that's another rare. I mean, two of those things, that doesn't
Well, you
stop
don't get a
people.
chance of a ticket really, but
Well, yeah, there's very little chance, there's a game warden out there.
there is not a game warden. So there's nobody enforcing any of this out of the water, but.
So if David Null
Nah,
was here, he's the guy in charge of this in town. I mean, we're advisory, and we've got a part, but he's the guy in charge. He would be like, just another voice here, with the same backs and forth. He hasn't had a strong view because of all these pluses and minuses. I mean, you two have strong opinions. I can bring those back to him. I already have had a lot of his plus and minus with him, and he's still just like, if he was sitting here, he'd be walking out with the same position. We're all like, what do we do? Some people feel this way, some people feel this way. It sort of seems to land in the middle. Do you both feel so strongly I ought to go back at it, like maybe bring Monica into this, for example, and see if we get David to change? Voice our concern again.
Well, I can only say that the Parks and Rec Commission has a responsibility for the signage and what goes on in the parks.
Yep.
So it's my commission that's responsible for that.
So that adds extra weight
Right,
to
it's
something you
not, it's
might say
actually
to
not
David.
mine,
Yeah.
she doesn't have the authority on parks.
Yep,
The
yep.
commission does. So
Agreed.
I can only say, as chair of the commission, and having worked in a regulated industry for my entire career, it makes me uncomfortable to have a sign up in the park which effectively advertises shellfishing, albeit maybe with a disclaimer, and we know the beds are closed, and we've been provided with bright yellow signs by the state, and we haven't posted them in the same place. It just personally makes me uncomfortable as chair of the commission and responsible for the parks.
Maybe taking the signs down.
What's involved with taking the signs down?
I think you could take the top of the sign off. I think it's on there with a bolt or something, and you could just leave a metal post there, but I'm not sure. It's probably been about 5 years since we did that.
But what's the challenge with taking some duct tape and just stick them into the sign?
Well, that's,
Guess what?
that's why I got these and.
Who's gonna take it off when it gets
When
open?
you tell me, I will go take it
No,
off.
but then, and then who's gonna put it back on when it gets closed again because of rainfall? I mean, it's,
I can be,
it's,
we can be working with the park staff about that. They're in the parks, they're out raking the beaches and everything almost every day. They're
Well,
hoisting the
if-
flags, they're, you know,
It would be a daily phone call.
oh, Lindsay Dale,
And this is
not this
something that
summer.
screams to be done online and only online. And I'll tell you, I just went to the website and I'm kind of impressed here, where the first thing on the town website is, are shellfish beds open? Call 203-838-9807.
That's the regime.
I mean, it's right there, and then there's
So that's
links
Or they should
to,
just say our shellfish beds are closed till further notice. Which might be an
It's
easy
the
matter.
same process for
And then when you get back
Darien,
to a normal cycle.
Norwalk,
you
go back to this.
Yeah.
and one other town, I think.
Well, Lori, I respect your view as chairman of Parks and Rec. Do you want to have a one-on-one discussion with David Knopf?
I can talk to Dave, I said, I can talk to Cam in the office too, or I've got the commission meeting
Yeah.
next week, I can discuss it with, the commissioners and see how they feel about it. Because this is just my
Yeah, no, I hear you.
view,
You've got a valid,
as being
valid
somebody
viewpoint
who
you're
was
expressing.
trained to be very buttoned up and transparent and everything's posted and, I ran my, we told groups we were reviewing their files, they say, oh, we talked about it, if it's not in the file, it doesn't exist, so,
So-
but that's my mindset and I admit to it.
Alternatively, could, our two recreational shell fishing areas are both very small. Could you get permission from the owner of Great Island to allow us to put a couple of those right on shore where they'd be very visible, since for now,
Yeah.
we are closed? And could you get permission from the property owner of Contentment Island to have a couple of those signs? There's the rock outcropping kind of in the middle that forms a little bit of a horseshoe at low tide. I don't know how you put a sign up there because it's one giant rock, where exactly you put it, but maybe you could put a couple signs there and a couple signs, on Great Island, temporarily. You and I had talked about going out there
Yeah, so
anyway to sort
I don't
of
think I responded.
cement that
Yeah.
other permanent sign into place.
It's probably the most effective way, to be frank.
Yeah.
Everything else is less direct. Because that gets people who don't get a permit.
Yeah, which is probably most people.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Do you think that? So?
Do I think that?
Yeah.
Yeah, why would anyone get a permit?
These the rules. I got a permit. These are the rules.
There is literally no enforcement of
Yeah.
it, so that's
Yeah.
creates a certain incentive for people not to have a permit.
It's like the dog rules in the park, people know and they just choose not to follow.
How much does the permit cost?
$15,
Yeah, something like that. 20?
$20.
All right. Well, so why don't I go back to David Knopf, tell him of this discussion, see if he's had any different views. You did mention posting that. I don't know if we can get. I guess we could get a post and cement and.
Yeah, just to let you know, where you got those no hunting signs, they use a little
Yeah.
stake in the ground with a,
Or you just get a can, coffee can, and I don't know, make a little foundation. I guess with the wind that will work, but.
I mean, before I put that permanent post out there for the shellfishing, no shellfishing sign on Great Island, the state just had it bolted to a tree until a hurricane took
Is
it
that
out.
so?
So you could nail a couple of those to trees on Great Island if the owners didn't get too upset, but
I have felt sort of indifferent about this because of the mix of things. But I'm hearing both your objections, and I don't know, I guess I sort of, with all of us being sort of neutral, but a couple people being strongly objecting, it seems to me we should have some listen to that. And so, perhaps we should take the signs down for the meantime and put these up. That might be the best thing to do in terms of,
I'm sort of in agreement with them.
Yeah.
Because this is an extenuating circumstance
yeah,
and it's a longer duration, the onus should be on the shellfisher, right? The onus should be on the person to follow the rules, call the number, and check and see if it's okay, right? But because this is dragged out for as long as it has, and because there's no real end date in sight,
it's a good point.
that this is an extenuating circumstance, and tape those on top of the permit that's in the park, right? Or where, is there one, is there two?
there's two.
There are two. Go tape those on top of it for temporary, and they're either gonna blow off in the middle of the winter, right?
Well, you're not gonna tape that on, you're gonna tape a sign that says recreational shellfishing closed until further notice.
Sure.
And then you'd go out to the beds and put those signs in some visible location so that someone who's not going
Yeah.
to the ramp or the boat club.
Yeah.
Because there are people from Stamford and Westport and some other places who, for whatever reason, decide to buy a permit in the town of Darien.
I think you make a good point, when
It's
she's
an
expressing she'll
extenuating-
correct this, there's not, it's like, I won't get, she's not saying I'll correct it by October
Correct.
15th.
There's no drop dead date.
And this is the
Not
state,
too
and
much.
this is CTD, this
Yeah.
is slow molasses stuff, and in that respect, we're not just presiding over a little blip, but maybe a longer term thing, which is a good point.
It's only fair that Salem Street gets one too, because, you know, there's an access point there and it's probably their sewage.
Which is a point David Carey's made. But David Knopf had some quick rebuttals of that, he was not so certain Carey was right, yeah.
Well, if you want to, as a project, to go out and cement the other sign in and, you know, try to put those up, I'd be happy to do that with you.
Well, I think, actually, because the rest of us are sort of neutral, but you two are coming out strong, I think that.
I have to go put the sign out there?
No. There's a real point to listening to, that this is, is an expression of
Manual
strength.
labor.
The only thing I would say is whoever ends up having to put those up, put them up in a way that they don't just immediately fall into the water and wash up on my beach and then I have to throw them away.
It would be kind of fun
Because
though.
those are just like big, heavy pieces of plastic. If they end up in the water, they're gonna be there for ever.
Million years.
Reflected back on this bureaucratic shame.
Yes.
They have them at Cove Park, these signs up all the place, because people are definitely on the side of Hollow Pond, it's definitely contaminated in there. People are in there all the time, and the cops actually arrested a few of them.
Really?
Well, I don't know if they have jurisdiction over it, but they did it anyway, so.
All right,
Slow day on the beat.
so we'll let David Knopf know what we're up to. And David, I'll take you up on that, on the
Okay.
project.
Yeah, I'm away for the next couple of weeks for trade shows and stuff, but I can help with that too.
How are you gonna get permission from over on the east side?
Yeah. Well, on the west
East-
side too. We don't know it yet.
Well,
Stein
right,
Krause.
at least on the west side, there's a history of there being shellfish signage.
Yes, and since, and I've spoken to the property owner there to go out there to begin with, to put up the other sign.
Is that the Stein Crosses?
I can't remember, I have it in my
Yeah.
email somewhere, whoever I spoke to.
Yeah, the Steinkrauss is on Great Island.
Anyway, I don't remember the name. The other side, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's ownership of that big rock out there in the middle.
Who owns Fish Island? It used to be the doctor, but now it's a.
Felder.
Felder, yeah.
No, that's the Halversons.
They moved on.
Halversons, right. So wouldn't they own maybe no, not a rock.
No, because it's the Halversons, then the Jameses, and then I don't know who owns around the corner, which is
Yeah.
where mostly. So the Jameses would be, they own like most of the beach that has the rope, and so that part out front there is in front of the Jameses, but
Would courtesy call to them? Do you know them by any chance?
I know them, but I'm not calling them
No,
to ask them.
Oh, I got a sign.
To ask them if I can put a sign up in front of their house.
Yeah.
yeah.
That, because I mean, it's one thing over on the west side, which is it's not in people's line of sight. On the east side, you're like putting it right up in front of their view.
Well,
Well, I
maybe
think-
they'd be happy not to have shellfishers there, so.
Let's let David Knopf know what we're thinking.
Okay.
Suggest that he, you know, if he thinks necessary, if he has issues against this, talk with Monica. Let's just let the people know what we're trying to do. I think that makes sense. So, sounds good. Thank you, Laurie, and Julie. It's good thinking. Any other business? All clear on that, so should we adjourn then?
Motion to
Motion to adjourn. Second.
We're adjourned.
Adjourned.
That's,